Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Zmore, the dad in DPS, and today we're going to talk about builds, and more specifically the build that I have been using for raids. So before we get into it, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and let's get on with the video. So obviously we are going to start off with the perks that we have in this build. And as you can see, there is a lot of different things that have gone here. There will be some things that people will prefer to have, some things that people will maybe not want to have, but you know, you can tweak this any way you want because there is a couple of different modes you could go with it. So first off, we'll talk about the strength tree. So we've got blocker, bandolier, we have all free heavy gunner perks, and traveling pharmacy. Now, one thing I would say is you could, in theory, reduce some heavy gunner to put into bandolier to make you a bit more tanky, a bit more survivable. But honestly, you don't really need it on this build. And to be fair, I don't even really need blocker on this build. It's just there as something to fill a slot. Honestly, I could put so many other things in there, like a rank a sturdy frame, a rank a strong back. It really doesn't make a huge difference. But the main kind of things that I like on here are the heavy gunning perks, which is going to give us more damage than we can possibly imagine. Then we've got bandolier for that carry weight of ballistic ammo, and traveling pharmacy for the chem weight. And when you're in raids, you're going to get chunk of ammo depending on the weapon you're using, and you're going to get a chunk of meds depending on the weapon you're using. Then, in the perception tree, we have concentrated fire, rank 3. Now, again, you could reduce the perception down to 1 here and then put the points in somewhere else. I kinda, in certain instances, struggle to find things to put into certain trees. I think if I was going to take 2 out of perception, I'd bump it into charisma, just so that I could then put on an extra charisma perk, because there is actually quite a lot of good charisma perks. But concentrated fire, I've got rank 3 just because it gives me more accuracy, more damage per shot, that kind of thing. Then, in the endurance tree, we have 2 in rejuvenated. Now, if you don't know what rejuvenated does, this gives you additional HP and additional action point regen and additional disease resistances when you are fully fed. So I think it's like 15 on all 3, so it's 15 HP, 15% AP regen, and 15 disease resistance. So it's not like the most grandiose perk, but it definitely is going to give you something back. And it also allows me to use essentially endurance on my armor rather than the powered effect, because it's kind of given me a similar effect to it. Next, we have starch genes, which most people won't need explained, but this stops me from developing new mutations and losing the mutations that I have. We've got vaccinated, which gives us more disease resistance based on the endurance that we have. Bullet shield. Now, this is one of the most important perks on here. Now, bullet shield is insane. While I'm firing my gun, I think it's ballistic stuff. It says 20% deflect chance for 6 seconds. It doesn't explain that very well, but I'm fairly certain it's like ballistic or energy projectiles. Basically, we can deflect projectiles back at the enemy. Now, why that's so important is the first boss in the raid actually gets completely shredded by deflect. If you're using this with ricochet and the other thing that I've got it in my armor, reflectors, you're going to do a lot of damage to that boss just by standing there and tanking its hits. And 20% is not bad at all. That's 20% damage you're not taking. Then we have First Quencher, which more endurance gives us more AP, which is pretty self-explanatory. Natural resistances, this gives us elemental resistance like fire, poison, that kind of thing, when we are not diseased. And, you know, in tandem with vaccinated, hopefully we won't get diseased. Then we have Through Hiker, which gives us reduced weight of our drinks and food. Iron Stomach, which gives us damage resistance and energy resistance based on our endurance. And Life Giver, which gives us HP per every point of endurance we have. So this whole thing revolves around the more endurance points we have, the better these perks work, with a few exceptions such as, you know, bullet shield and the deflect chance and things like that. But I'll go into a little bit of deflect lore that Wiggle actually passed down to me. Once we get to Ricochet, I'll talk about it. And then the charisma tree, we have 11 points, and we have tenderizers, suppressors, team medic, strange in numbers, and field surgeon. Now, There's a couple of perks in here that you could swap around and change and move in for other ones, but what I would recommend is this is actually the perk tree that you want to share perks from, because a lot of them do different things that benefit your team. For example, if nobody in your team's using Field Surgeon, then maybe share it. Then everybody's stim packs and radaways help bear. Or if nobody's using Team Medics, share it, and then everybody's healing each other with their perks. But yeah, Tenderizer is going to increase the damage you do to target for 10 seconds after you attack. Suppressor does a kind of opposite effect where you reduce the damage of the enemy for 2 seconds by 30%, which is a massive amount. Team Medics makes all stim packs that anybody's using heal each other if you share it, but essentially you heal your teammates every time you use a stim pack. Strange in Numbers, which gives our positive mutation effects 25% of a stronger effect, and this is better if obviously our teammates are mutated as well. Then we have Field Surgeon, which makes these things work better. Intelligence is probably the tree that it's not as important. We've got batters included for the ammo weight. Stabilized, which increases our armor pen on heavy guns and accuracy by 45%. We have portable power, so no, that's not the one I wanted. It's not portable power, it's power use that we should have on. This doubles our fusion core duration. So yeah, this makes us able to use VATs more often and just generally use less fusion cores, which if you're using a heavy build in the raids, you will find you will use a lot more fusion cores than you did previously. In our agility tree, we have 2 perks, both maxed out. Dodgy, which gives us a 30%, avoid 30% of incoming damage at the cost of 30 action points per hit. And Action Boy, which makes us regenerate our action points 45% faster. I am tongue-tied today. But essentially, like between the two of these, we are regenerating our AP faster, and when we are taking hits, 30 action points are being used to avoid us from taking damage. So when we are tanking things, we become very tanky, because that's, if you can imagine, we are avoiding 30% of the hits. 20% of the time, we are reflecting those hits back. So yeah, it kind of exponentially means that we're tankier for multiple different reasons. Now, in our last tree, we have Critical Savvy, Good with Salt, Junk Shield, Class Freak, 4 Leaf Clover, Ricochet, and better criticals. So I'll talk about the critical perks first. We've got Critical Savvy, which critical hits now only consume 5% of our critical meter. That means we can use more crits more often. And better criticals, which increases our critical damage by 100%. Now, when it comes to damage, that isn't actually increasing our damage by 100%. It's very complicated. It increases your damage by X amount, but it's not actually physically 100%. Like if I've got this perk on and I'm critting for 1,000, I'm not going to suddenly be doing 2,000. So don't be surprised if it doesn't seem as big a difference as you were expecting, but it does add up. Then we have our damage avoidance perks, which are Junk Shield and Ricochet. So Ricochet, this gives us more chances to deflect bullets based on our luck. Now, something that Wiggle was saying to me before is that the deflect chance and the deflect effect is better the better armor you have. Now, Ricochet has been recently changed that if you're in power armor, the deflect on it is actually better on power armor than it is on regular armor. But apparently, your actual armor value increases the damage of that reflection. So this could explain why the first boss's shield gets shredded so much by you reflecting damage. So the more luck you can stack within a certain degree, and the more armor you can stack, makes this actually stronger. Then we have Junk Shield. So we gain resistances based on our luck and the amount of junk killed. Now, the best way to describe this is put on 100 steel into your inventory. This is going to increase your resistances and allow you to basically tank more and essentially deal more ricochet damage. I'm talking like Sean Connery today. But yeah, ricochet. This helps with ricochet, as does any of the ones that give us additional armor. Then in our last slot, we have Good with Salt. Food in our inventory will spoil 90% slower, which means our teas, our foods, all those kind of things will spoil very slowly and allows us to carry them about for much longer without having to put them in a freezer or a fridge. And that's pretty much the regular perks that we've got here. If there's any ones that you're unsure about or want additional reasoning why I'm using them, leave that down in the comment below. I'll try and explain to anybody if they've got any questions, or if you've got any suggestions of what you think might be better, definitely put them down there as well. Now, the last part of the actual perks we're going to talk about is the legendary perks. Now, as you probably noticed, we had more legendary points than you could possibly have without these legendary perks in here. So what we've got on is legendary strength, luck, intelligence, and agility. And for anybody that hasn't read the screen already, this gives us an additional 5 to our perk points and our actual stats. So you'll need, essentially, in your regular view, 10 to max out that particular stat in terms of perk points. And in the last two spots, we have electrical absorption, 20% chance energy damage will recharge the power armor's fusion core and restore health, which makes us tankier on enemies that are using energy damage by a mile. And then taking one for the team. Enemies take 30% more damage when they attack me, and if we're on a team. Now, one thing I would say is you could change taking one for the team for different things. You could put on funky duds for more poison resistance. You could put on power sprinter so you can run around and not receive as much of a AP drain or whatnot on your power armor. There's also legendary power armor reboot, which gives you a chance to auto revive, and there's also rads, which just gradually restores rad effects on there. There are lots of perks that could go in this slot, but realistically the ones that I think are the most useful for the raid and the most useful in general are the ones that I've got on here. I feel like I get more out of the perk points than anything else, and electrical absorption is a must. Taking one for the team, yeah, definitely a must. Alrighty, so we're going to quickly show you our stats and give a brief rundown of why they are what they are. So we have 641 HP and 297 AP. Now, we're only using 2 food buffs at the moment. One is pemmican, the other is perfect bubblegum. That's to show our kind of HP and AP at max endurance, and our full, our full fed and full hydrated buff on top of that. So these numbers can get bigger. It is entirely possible. It's just that's what they are. When I'm just wandering around, I'm not going to be using all my food buffs all the time. It seems a bit of a waste to use kind of good ones when you're not doing certain things, especially if you struggle to get some of them some of the time. Then, when it comes to damage resistances, we have 811 armor, 207 poison, 57 fire, 621 energy, 57 frost, and 325 radiation. Now, we are using Union power armor, so that's why we have so much poison resistance. And in the effects, you're able to see exactly what we're getting from some of our perks. Action Boy 45% regen. We've got 100 energy and damage resist from Iron Stomach, 117 energy and damage resist from Junk Shield. We do have 100 Vault Steel in our inventory currently, because that gives us a nice amount of weight and gets that buff running. 131 HP from Life Giver, 57 of the free elemental resistances from Natural Resistance. Ricochet is giving us 21% deflect chance. First Quencher, 130%, 130 AP. Then we have Carry Weight and Poison Resistance from Union, and a 46 Disease Resistance from Vaccinated. Now you're seeing there's our 2 food buffs, Pemmican and Perfect Bubblegum. We'll go into more food buffs in a little bit, but this is what I'm just talking about right now. Pemmican with Carnivore will give you +6 endurance. Then we've got our fully fed buffs, which you can see 1 strength, 45 HP, 45 disease resistant. If we scroll all the way down, fully hydrated, it's 1 endurance, 45 AP, and 45 disease resist. So yeah, that's how that kind of works. Now, in terms of our perks, we are using Bird Warden's, Carnivore, Eagle Eyes, Egghead, Empath, Healing Factor, Herd Mentality, Marsupial, Scaly Skin, Speed Demon. Now, with most of these perks, because we are using, for example, Strength in Numbers and the other mutation perk that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, we are getting a bigger buff to our positive effects and a smaller debuff to our negative effects from all of these. So I would heavily recommend using these kind of things. You can get away with using Herbivore on this build, and with Herbivore you do potentially get higher chance to be able to crit things, but at the same time you lose out on things like endurance because the carnivore buffs, there's quite a lot of good ones that I recommend using in general. But this is what we're using. Like, these are the mutations that I'm currently using for various reasons, such as damage resists, that the downside is not as bad as the good, well, not as good as the good side. For example, with speed demon, you know, hunger and first while moving, we're getting a bunch of move speed and reload speed. With bird bones, we're getting 4 agility and we fall slower. We might take more damage to our limbs, but when you're in power armor, that tends not to be an issue. You're also getting eagle eyes, 4 perception, extra crit, but we're losing some strength. You know, like, mutations are one of those things. Everybody's going to be a little bit different with them, but yeah, these are the ones I'm using for a bunch of different effects. Herd mentality I definitely recommend as well. And in terms of what our specials look like as they sit, we have 17 strength, 11 perception, 33 endurance with all our buffs and our armor and things, 13 charisma, 16 intelligence, 12 agility, and 18 luck. So yeah, quite a lot of stats there. Now this is the portion where I'm going to talk about my armor. Now I have 2 different power armor sets that I use in 2 different ways. And what I'm going to say is the first one is a union set. Now, every single piece on this union set has the exact same mods, which is Overeaters, Endurance, Sentinels, and Reflective. Now, Overeaters is pretty self-explanatory. When we are using a full set of Overeaters, you're getting 6% times 5, that's 30% damage reduction from just existing when your hunger and health meters are full. So yeah, 6% per piece, 30% in total from Overeaters. Then we have Endurance in the second star slot, which is giving us +2 Endurance, which again is giving us a total of 10 extra Endurance. Then we have Sentinels, which is giving us 75% chance to reduce damage by 15% while not moving. Now, if you add all the pieces together, because I've not done it in my head, that's 15, 15, 15, 15, that's 60. 75% chance to reduce 75% damage while not moving. That's a massive thing. And there's a lot of people that are saying at the moment that Sentinels is bugged. Apparently the way that the bug is currently working is that Sentinels is over reducing damage. You're basically taking less damage than you should be taking, and then it repays it back at a later point due to lag or some timey-wimey convoluted crap. I'm not finding that. I am tanking things like a god at the moment, so, you know, take that with a pinch of salt from my side. And obviously, if you're in the future and this bug has been fixed or proven right or wrong, then, you know, it doesn't really matter then. Then we have in our last slot, Reflective. Now, Reflective returns 10% of damage received from an enemy target back towards them, up to 50% on all 5 pieces. I am running all 5 pieces. So essentially, I am dealing 50% of the enemy's damage back to them at any given time when they are attacking me. Then you have all my other buffs taken into consideration. We've got all the reflective damage, ricochet, and things like that. And quite frankly, most enemies don't survive just attacking me. I can stand and tank things and they just all start dying quite a lot. It's kind of funny to watch, I'll be honest. But this is my armor. As you can see, I'll go quickly through each piece to prove that's what I'm using. They are all Overeaters, Endurance, Sentinels, Reflective. Now, the next thing I would say is about the actual, pieces. With the headpiece, I'm using a sensor array because that will give me 2 perception. I would put on the intelligence one, but I don't have that mod for this one. So in theory, put on the intelligence one, it's much better. On your arms, I don't have a mod I want to put on the arms, so put whatever you like on the arms in terms of that. For your, that's an arm as well. For your legs, calibrated shocks, obviously one of the best ones, which gives you additional carry weight. And then for the torso, where is the torso? Torso. There it is. For the torso, I'm currently using the Medic's Pump. Now, I know some people will prefer using the Jetpack, but the good thing about the Medic's Pump is that it heals me without me having to heal myself. This literally is constantly just using a stim pack while I'm not paying attention. And when you combine that with a bunch of other stuff I'm using and a bunch of different things I'm using, this basically makes me nigh unkillable in a lot of circumstances. There is going to be obviously situations where I will die if I'm standing in poison, for example, and I just don't move quick enough, but it is one of those things where I am literally able to tank a lot of stuff with this armor. Now, our second set of armor is a Vulcan set. And what we've got on here, you can see I've got the internal database for intelligence on the head, but what we've got on the Vulcan set is overeaters, powered, sentinels, and scanners. Now, when it comes to these effects, overeaters, I think that's self-explanatory. We are all about that damage mitigation, and it's the best effect that you can get on your power armor in that first slot. Powered gives us 5% action point regen, and that's a grand total of 25% extra action point regen on a full set. Then we have Sentinels, which we've already explained in the last one, so I'm not going into that. But our last effect is Scanners. Now, I have a full stack, so that is action point cost of VATS attacks are reduced by 5%, and that is 25% on a full stack. So any VATS attacks we use are reduced by 25%. And this set gives us action point regen. It also reduces your usage of your fusion core, and essentially we're getting a load of cool stuff on here. Now, I've got the core assembly on here currently because, again, action point regen is on here. Then we have on our legs, we have calibrated shocks again, and the arms, yeah, I'm kind of, I don't really have anything on there, so I wouldn't worry about that. Now, something I'm going to say about these armor pieces is that on the Vulcan set, there is a lot of bugs revolving around AP and AP regen. Sometimes this set can make a massive difference. Other times it makes no difference because my AP won't go down. Or it makes no difference because my AP will not regenerate. So Vulcan armor, while in theory is really, really good, there are some circumstances where you absolutely get zero use out of it because the game is being stupid and janky. And a lot of the time I will be in my defensive armor rather than this stuff. But I thought it was wise to include it because if I was going for maximum DPS in a lot of circumstances, this armor would make a huge, huge, huge difference. Whereas my defensive armor is very good for me just tanking the world and everything else in between. On top of that, I'm also going to say is you do not need this gear to do this raid. I did this raid before with just the perfect defense without the reflective. I literally did it with this armor without the 4-star effect. So you don't need the 4-star effects on any of this gear in order to be able to do what you need to do to get through the raid. So, you know, this is something to work towards, not what you need as a baseline. Next up, we have weapons. Now, if you've watched one of my recent videos, you'll recognise this one, the Badman. This is a plasma caster with anti-armor, vital, luckily, and conductors. One thing I'd say about conductors, I think a lot of people are assuming this effect is worse than it is. I actually notice the lack of me using this effect when I'm not using it. My health doesn't regenerate as much. I don't get AP regen as much. So I am actually noticing a decent effect from this. And Conductors is one of those effects I would heavily recommend that you maybe play around with, see how you feel with it. There is some kind of thoughts on it that a slower weapon works with it better, but this is one of the ones I use, and it does decent damage during the raid and can deal with some of the bosses, you know, when you're in a team with people. Then we have one of 3 of the versions of this weapon I'm currently using. Now, pretty much this one's anti-armor vital optimized. We've got the calibrated receiver, the swift core receptacle, and the accelerated nozzle. But the other ones that we're using are armor, crit, AP, but with the stinging core and the accelerated nozzle. And then the last one, I believe, is explosive. So it's armor, explodes, AP with the swift core and the accelerated nozzle. I'm not entirely certain what the best variation of this gun is anymore. And we're kind of just playing around with it and seeing which one kind of does the best kind of thing. Currently, I have pinpointers on the main one that I've been using, which is the crit and speed one, which is doing decent damage. I'm actually quite enjoying it. So yeah, it's that kind of way where I'm not entirely certain what the best combination of this weapon is, but I am certain that this is one of the best weapons currently for raids. Get a plasma Gatling and you'll be able to do most of the things. Even if you've not got a build that's entirely dedicated to it, you will be able to do some decent damage for definite. Then we have the Mo Slayer, which is my auto axe with vampires, heavy hitters, strengths, and pounders on there. And the reason for pounders is this thing absolutely shreds anything that you can get your hands on with it. This is especially good for the free Enclave Soldier boss fight, and it's actually really good for the first boss fight, because if you get onto that platform without touching it and hit the first robot boss, this thing will absolutely annihilate him in a matter of seconds. You could opt for more damage by taking out vampires, but you know, you're just reducing your survivability with that, but that thing is absolutely insane. And then we have the anti-armor, explosive, durability, Gauss minigun. Now, I haven't used this as much in the raids, but this is also a very, very good option for something you could use in raids. It is very ammo intensive in comparison to the plasma Gatling and the plasma caster, but it does have some insane damage. This isn't the best variation of it. We'll make one of them in the future and we'll go into it, but this is something I was using in raids to begin with, and I opted for the other ones because we're a lot more efficient for me. And then we have our last weapon that I would recommend you bring to raids or in general, and that is a shotgun with quad, speed, and reload. I opted for the combat shotgun because the crystal room that I specifically use this in, the crystals blow up based on hits, not on damage. So this is a very good weapon for just blasting through the crystals and taking them out in 2 shots for the most part. So yeah, very good weapon for bringing that, and you know, has some much needed use. I didn't put a 4-star on it for those specific reasons, and to be honest, you don't need a 4-star on any of these weapons, with maybe the exception of the Mo Slayer, because Pounders is busted right now. I think it's doing like up to 1000% damage rather than the 100% at the moment. Probably going to get nerfed, but it is there. It is what it is. But that's essentially what we're using weapon-wise, and as I said, when it comes to any of these things, this is what you should aspire for, not necessarily what you need to get through there. And even then, I'm still trying to figure out what the best combinations and the best effects are for the raids, because I'm not 100% certain on all of it yet. So for the last part of this portion, we're going to talk about the buffs that I tend to use in my build. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't use all the buffs under the sun, but I will use certain ones depending on when I find them. The first being Perfect Bubblegum, no hunger and thirst for 60 minutes. This makes it incredibly good because we pretty much have that guaranteed overeaters 30% damage reduction that whole time, and it just makes it a lot easier. Also, we get the buffs from our AP, HP, and disease resistance, as well as a strength increase and an endurance increase. Then we have Pemmican. This is something I can make at my camp, and this gives us 6 endurance, which is very good because, as you saw, we are using endurance to buff all of our stats to massive amounts, which is absolutely amazing. And then nobody will be, you know, confused by Company T. We get AP regen increased by 10% and another 20% disease resist. With all our disease buffs on, we're probably 100% disease resisting everything. But you know, you can never be too careful. Now, when it comes to your other buffs, I'm using stuff from the Mirelurk steamer in the shape of cooked soft shell meat, which is giving us additional max AP. We didn't have it on there, but that is another one we're using, as well as Deathclaw steak from my other, it's like the Deathclaw griller thing that gives me 4 strength as well. You know, these aren't necessary ones, but they're kind of stuff I use because they're just easy to get. We also have High Voltage Heavy, which is giving us plus 15% energy gun damage for 5 minutes. Now, you could go down the route of adding in perks that increase the length of time alcohol matters, but most boss fights aren't lasting you more than 5 minutes, so this is something you can pop and you're able to take out the bosses pretty quickly. But in raids, since we're not really going for condition of our weapons, this is a really good one because it does increase the condition cost of your weapons, but that extra 15% energy gun damage is certainly very useful. And then the last buff that I tend to use regularly at this point is the Sweet Mute Fruit Tea, which gives us plus 50% crit damage for an hour, and the same kind of thing that you would use with the company tea. Basically, both of these work quite well, and they stack well together for great effect. And then the other buffs that you can use, and I do use these very loosely because it's really dependent on if you can find the damn things, which is the biggest point, is there is magazines. There's some that give you max AP, some that give you better AP, some that give you, for example, God, where are they? There's so many of them. Like, there's bobbleheads that give you stuff as well. You know, heavy weapons bobbleheads would be ideal because that'll give you lots more damage in terms of that. There's guns and bullets that give crit damage. So, for example, plasma gun crit damage on here. So, guns and bullets 9 is particularly good for your plasma gatling, your plasma caster. Then we have, I'm sure Live and Love has a crit effect as well. So there's lots of different ones. What I'd say is use the ones that affect you the most and you can get a hold of the easiest. The magazines and the bobbleheads, while they are a lot easier to get in the current raids, it's very difficult to get the ones that you actually want. So I would recommend that you're quite careful which ones you use. But then we also have a chem. So the chem that I tend to use is Psycho Buff. So this gives us 25 damage, free strength, free endurance, and max health for 3 minutes, and increases the hunger first. But that doesn't matter if you are using your freaking your perfect bubblegum. So literally I just pop this before a boss fight, and it gives me more damage, more strength, more endurance, allows me to do lots of different things. So it's one I would recommend that you use as well. There is other buffs that are out there. There's other things, like you could go down the herbivore route and make blight soup for additional crit. There's lots and lots of different ways of going about this, but this is currently what I'm using and what I prefer to use during my current build. So this last section of the video, I just wanted to talk about the build, how I feel it works, and my general thought process and how it works outside of raids as well as in. And yeah, like I had this plan to have a suit of armor around the world, to quote Iron Man. Like, I feel honestly in this build and my gear, if I'm wearing the tanky set, I am nigh unkillable by a lot of factors in this game. I have not died outside of raids since I had completed the build. I've just not died. And I've not really died since I completed the build without the full, like, reflectors on the armor. Like, the armor that I had was Overeater's AP Sentinels. I've recently added the endurance on it because I just feel like there's more of a benefit to having endurance than the AP regen, because it was powered originally. But we've added the endurance on, and I just feel so tanky. I feel like I've got so much HP, and I feel like things hit me, and I barely notice it. I walk around in the game, and most of the enemies die to their own damage. If something's shooting a gun at me, then they just get completely obliterated by their own damage. The reflection hits them back, and they just go down like a sack of potatoes. And in the raid, it's kind of a similar feeling. You know, apart from the insta-kill mechanics, I tend not to take a huge amount of damage. I can sit and tank most things in that raid quite happily, with the exception of, as I said, the insta-kill mechanics and the what's the word? The snake's poison. Like, if I'm standing in as much poison as can possibly be stacked on the one spot, I will die. So if I'm not paying attention, I can die to the snake boss. But if I move slightly to the left, slightly to the right, slightly forward, or slightly back, that snake is never going to actually physically kill me without, you know, barfing me into the acid. It is a very, 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 very tanky build, and as a result, it kind of makes everything by comparison very, very weak. And I feel like I'm playing God mode in a sense now that I'm at the stage that I'm at. On the kind of flip side of it, Damage wise, you know, I don't feel like I'm pulling the most damage that I possibly could, but with the way that the build's set up, I think I'm damn near close to it. I think maybe the way I play or just the weapon setups that I'm currently using aren't quite the right variations to maximize the use and the effectiveness of this new patch. And this is the thing, like, we've had a lot of heavy weapons reduced in AP cost, we've had a bunch of new things popped in, things rejigged and moved around, and certain things messed with. So it's not, I'm not quite there with the damage side of it. I've not quite figured that out completely, but I like to experiment, I like to figure things out, and I like to get there. So we will eventually figure that out and do it. And when it comes to the raids, obviously the way I look at it is the first boss. The first boss, you just sit and shoot at that back port, and once that goes down, absolutely wail on him. That's a very easy, simplistic boss fight. The second boss fight or encounter is all skill. Like, it's all down to you as the player. It doesn't matter what build you're using for the most part. It doesn't matter what gear you're using for the most part. It just matters that you know what you're doing. You know where to run, the layout of the little maze that all the fuel canisters are in, and you just figure it out that way. There's nothing that gear can do to help you here. You just either are good at it or you're not, or you're going to get good at it by just keep on doing it and learning how to do the encounter. Then we've got the free Enclave soldiers, and I'd say the melee current bug with Pounders, where it does obscene damage, is incredibly fantastic for whittling down those free guys. So abusing it and changing your build slightly to adjust to like melee damage, you know, putting in melee perks instead of the heavy weapons perks, will absolutely shred them and completely annihilate them. So I would recommend that you use that, and you'll be able to see that on screen, no doubt. We also have the fourth encounter, which again, this is all down to, you know, knowing how to do the encounter well. The entire gist of it is that you have to destroy crystals to damage any of the enemies there, but you've only got a limited amount of crystals, and there is one guy there that can one-shot everybody, so you need to kite him around, kill him as soon as possible, and then wait to gather up as many enemies under the big crystals as possible and annihilate them all in one go. The shotgun is perfect for this because, as I said, you do have to hit the things a certain amount of times, and since shotguns hit multiple times per shot, this reduces the amount of times you need to hit any given crystal to make it explode. So it's 2 shots with this to any of the standard crystals, and it's about 5 or 6 for the bigger crystals. And then we come to the snake encounter. Now, any of the damaging weapons, the plasma caster, the plasma gatling, the Gauss minigun, all of these are very viable for this boss fight, and if you target the eyes, you're going to be able to do a huge amount of damage. It all falls down to personal preference. I actually quite prefer the plasma caster because it's got a decent amount of speed in comparison to some slower weapons, but it's also got that kind of thing where I don't feel like I'm constantly reloading the damn thing, and the thing doesn't have a really long reload animation either, whereas your plasma caster and your plasma Gatling rather, and your Gauss minigun have slightly longer reload times, which can be really frustrating during that fight, because if you're constantly reloading and you're going and breaking animations or anything like that, that can be a bit frustrating. But overall, I feel like the build works incredibly well. I don't need to pay as much attention as somebody just encountering the raids with much less sturdy gear. So I feel like I can go into the raid and brain dead it to an extent because I take less damage. Because when I take damage, I'm taking less of a percentage of my health because I have so much health and I have so much resistance. It just feels like I am capable of just mindlessly going through it because I don't need to pay attention as much as other people. And this is the kind of thing, like, guys, get your gear sorted, and you will find the raids become a lot more trivial. And I know that is, you know, can sound harsh and things like that coming from somebody who's got a lot of good gear. But the reality is, you know, I've grinded for it. I have worked for that gear over a period of years. I've collected loads of stuff, and I have prepared for these things beforehand. It isn't just a case of I had this stuff lying around. No, I specifically grinded to make it. So I had it when the raids came out. And you guys will have to do a little bit of work to get there as well if you're not already there. It's unfortunate to say, but, you know, you don't get things for free, essentially. Either way, that is today's video. Now, if you guys have enjoyed Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. As I've said before, if you've got any suggestions, any comments, or any things that you'd like to add to the build, or, you know, things you'd like to be clarified about it, leave that in the comments down below as well. I'm really eager to see what you guys have got to say about it and what you guys think. Either way, that is the end of today's video, and I'll catch you all next time in the Wasteland.
In a world that's broken, oh so fine, Bethesda built a sweet design, where ghouls and super mutants sway to doo-wop rhythms night and day. In Diamond City's neon glow, the radio plays tunes we know. From the pre-war days to now, it's a doo-wop dream. I'll tell you how. Swinging through the ruins, love's not lost. In every nook, in every frost, we dance, we laugh, we reminisce in this post-apocalyptic bliss. Bottle caps may be our goal.